Able to speak with the victim's father, who told me his daughter was a vibrant person, loved by everyone, and just taken too soon.
She meant everything to us. She meant everything to me. Didn't know how much she meant to me until this day.
A father living a nightmare after receiving a call his daughter, 21-year-old Autumn Shanks, was shot and killed in her apartment early Friday morning.
What really happened to Autumn Shanks? A 21-year-old woman, full of dreams, found dead in her own bedroom. A single gunshot to the head. No signs of forced entry. No clear struggle. The only other person at the scene, her boyfriend, Dannquarious Byest. Was this an accident, a suicide, or something far more sinister? In the early hours of February 7th, 2025, at approximately 2 a.m., police received a report of a loud noise from Pinebrook Apartments on Knoll Drive in Ridgeland, Mississippi. When officers arrived, they found 23-year-old Dannquarious Byest standing outside. He appeared nervous. His story changed with each question. Inside the apartment, the scene was disturbingly quiet. The living room was untouched. The kitchen light was still on. But in the bedroom, officers found Autumn Shanks lying lifeless on the floor, a gunshot wound to her head. A pistol was nearby. Blood stained the carpet. Yet nothing looked out of place. No broken furniture. No signs of a fight. No forced entry. Was this self-inflicted? Or was this staged? Neighbors later reported hearing a loud bang, but had assumed it was something harmless. Maybe fireworks. Maybe a car backfiring. None of them recalled hearing any arguments, screams, or signs of distress that night. Yet, investigators soon learned that Autumn and Byest's relationship had been described as toxic by those who knew them. Tensions had been growing. Secrets had been kept. Before we begin, drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? What are your thoughts as this story unfolds? Because your voice matters. These are real lives, real tragedies, and real lessons that we can't afford to ignore. Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we uncover the stories that lurk in the shadows, the crimes that shake communities, the betrayals no one saw coming, and the horrifying truths hidden behind closed doors. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss the twists, the revelations, and the chilling reality of the cases we bring to you every day. Now, let's begin. Autumn Shanks was born and raised in Mississippi. She grew up in a small, close-knit family and was raised by her single mother, Lisa Shanks. Autumn was an only child and spent most of her time with her mother and close relatives. As a child, Autumn was curious and full of life. She liked to explore new things and was always eager to help others. She made friends easily and was kind to everyone she met. Autumn had many interests. She loved reading books and writing stories. She often spent hours at the library, learning about new topics and writing down her thoughts. She dreamed of becoming a journalist one day. She enjoyed spending time with her friends and family. People knew her for her bright smile and caring heart. Autumn was always friendly and made people feel comfortable around her. She also liked to ask questions and learn about the world. This made her more interested in uncovering important truths. Her goal was to become a journalist and report on real-life events. Autumn attended Terry High School, where she was a good student. Teachers and classmates liked her because she was smart, hardworking, and kind. She planned to go to college and study journalism. She wanted to write about real stories and help people understand the truth. Her dream was to make a difference in the world through her writing. Autumn Shanks was a 21-year-old woman from Mississippi. She was friendly, hardworking, and independent. Dannquarious Byest, a 23-year-old man, lived in the same area. He was charming at first, outgoing, and knew how to get people to like him. He and Autumn met through mutual friends at a small gathering. He seemed confident and made her laugh. They started talking, and after a few weeks, they began dating. At first, their relationship was good. They would go out to eat, watch movies, and spend time together. Autumn believed she had found someone who cared about her. Byest was attentive and protective, always checking on her and making sure she was okay. She liked how he made her feel special. After some time, Byest's behavior began to change. He became possessive and jealous. He wanted to control who Autumn talked to and where she went. He would check her phone and ask her who she was texting. If she went out, he wanted to know exactly where she was and who she was with. Fights and arguments started happening more often. Sometimes, they argued about small things, like who she was talking to or why she didn't reply to his messages quickly. The arguments became more serious, and Autumn's friends noticed a change in her behavior. Byest started calling her names and accusing her of things she did not do. He would make her feel guilty even when she had done nothing wrong. Autumn, who was once cheerful, became quieter and seemed stressed. Her friends noticed that she stopped spending time with them as much. She was isolating herself and always looked tired or upset. When they asked her if everything was okay, she would say she was fine. Even though friends warned her, Autumn kept forgiving him. She believed he could change and that things would get better. But the relationship continued to be toxic, and it became clear that Autumn wanted to leave. Neighbors in the apartment complex reported that they heard shouting and crying from her apartment on multiple occasions. They heard loud arguments late at night, but no one knew how serious the situation was. Autumn eventually decided that she wanted to leave the relationship. She realized that Byest's behavior was not normal and that she did not feel safe anymore. She started talking to a close friend about her decision. She told her friend that she felt trapped and did not know how to end things without making Byest angry. She also sent text messages where she mentioned her plans to break up with him. One of her texts said, "I think I'm done with him for good." She knew it would not be easy, but she did not want to be in a relationship anymore. The night before her death, Autumn texted her friend again, confirming that she was ready to leave. She had made up her mind. However, something happened that night that changed everything. On February 7th, 2025, at Pinebrook Apartments in Ridgeland, Mississippi, Autumn Shanks, 21, was at home alone. The night was quiet until approximately 2 a.m. when a loud bang was heard. Several neighbors noticed the noise, but did not call 911 immediately. The sound was quick and sharp, but due to the time of night, it was dismissed as a firecracker or another routine disturbance. Minutes later, Dannquarious Byest, 23, was observed outside the apartment complex. Witnesses later reported that he appeared uneasy, pacing back and forth and repeatedly glancing around. A 911 call was eventually placed, and law enforcement arrived on the scene. Upon their arrival, Byest was already outside the apartment. As officers approached, Byest voluntarily informed them that Autumn was inside the apartment, deceased. He further stated that the gunshot wound was the result of an accident or self-inflicted injury. Law enforcement proceeded to enter the apartment to conduct an initial assessment. Inside the apartment, there were no signs of forced entry. The front door was locked, and there was no evidence of a break-in or struggle. The living room and kitchen areas appeared undisturbed, with no apparent indications of conflict. Upon reaching the bedroom, officers discovered Autumn Shanks' body on the floor. She had sustained a single gunshot wound to the head. A pool of blood had formed beneath her, and a firearm was located near her body. Autumn Shanks' father, Orlando Shanks, played a significant role in her life and was deeply affected by her tragic death. Orlando described his daughter as his princess and expressed profound sorrow over her loss. Orlando was aware of the challenges in Autumn's relationship with Dannquarious Byest, describing it as toxic. He had observed troubling signs and had expressed concerns about Byest's behavior towards his daughter.
Thought I was in trouble. I didn't know what the call was about at 4 o'clock in the morning. So he told me to sit down, and I sat, and he went on to tell me that my daughter was dead. And I was stunned. I was shocked. I was hurt. I'm still hurting.
Ridgeland police say they received a call just before 2 a.m. about someone being shot in the head at the Pinebrook apartment complex. When officers arrived on scene, they were met by Dannquarious Byest. After searching the apartment, police found 21-year-old Shanks dead in the bedroom. Police say she had been shot. Orlando Shanks says his daughter was in a toxic relationship with Byest, but had no idea things were this bad until it was too late.
I saw my daughter last. We had a talk Tuesday. That was my last time with her. And if I had any notion that this was going on, I would have snatched her away. I would not have allowed her to go back into that situation.
However, investigators noted inconsistencies with the firearm's placement. Its position was not consistent with typical self-inflicted gunshot wounds. Further observations confirmed no visible signs of struggle or defensive wounds. No overturned furniture or physical disturbances in the room. No evidence of an intruder. Byest was detained at the scene as investigators began collecting evidence. While he maintained that Autumn had taken her own life, initial findings at the crime scene did not support his statement. The investigation proceeded with an autopsy to determine the angle and nature of the gunshot wound, forensic testing to analyze gunpowder residue on Byest's hands and clothing, phone record analysis to review recent calls, messages, and possible threats. The apartment was secured, and law enforcement began the process of reconstructing the events leading to the fatal shooting. The case remained under active investigation. The autopsy results confirmed that Autumn did not shoot herself. The wound on her head was examined, and the angle of the shot was not consistent with self-inflicted gunshot. Blood splatter patterns in the room also showed that the shot came from a different direction, which meant that someone else had pulled the trigger. The police collected forensic evidence at the crime scene. A gun was found near Autumn's body. It was tested for fingerprints and gunpowder residue. The test confirmed that Byest had gunpowder residue on his hands, which suggested that he had fired the weapon. Byest was taken to the police station for questioning. At first, he told officers that Autumn had shot herself. He claimed that they were arguing, and she suddenly took out a gun and shot herself in front of him. However, detectives noticed that his story kept changing. At one point, he said he was not in the room when the shot was fired. Later, he said he had tried to stop her. The inconsistencies in his statements made detectives suspicious. They compared his statements with the forensic evidence, and the facts did not match. The gunpowder on his hands and the blood spatter analysis proved that he was near Autumn when the gun was fired. Detectives searched Autumn's phone for any clues. They found a series of text messages from Byest that showed their relationship had problems. In the weeks before her death, Byest had sent multiple threatening messages. One text stood out to detectives. Byest had written, "If I can't have you, no one will." Other messages showed that Autumn wanted to end the relationship, but Byest did not want to let her go. She had told him that she needed space and wanted to move on. Byest responded with angry and possessive texts. Police also spoke to neighbors and friends who knew Autumn and Byest. Many neighbors reported hearing loud arguments from Autumn's apartment in the past. Some said they had heard shouting and crying on multiple occasions. One neighbor stated that the night of the shooting, they heard a loud bang but did not immediately call the police because they were unsure what had happened. Autumn's close friend told detectives that Autumn was afraid of Byest. She confided in this friend and said she felt trapped in the relationship. She had told her friend that she wanted to leave but was scared of what Byest might do. After gathering forensic evidence, text messages, and witness statements, police determined that Byest was responsible for Autumn's death. He was arrested and charged with murder and malicious mischief. During the investigation,
Byest has been charged with first-degree murder and is being held with no bond at the Madison County Detention Center. Ridgeland Police Chief Brian Myers released a statement about the incident, saying, "Our thoughts and prayers go out to the family and loved ones of Miss Shanks. Law enforcement feels the weight of such a tragic loss, and we mourn alongside this family." With this loss, Shanks' advice to others who may be in this situation is to take action before things get out of hand.
Be attentive. Do your part and just whatever you got to do, take them out of a bad situation because it won't end good.
police continued to collect evidence to build their case. They analyzed phone records, surveillance footage, and forensic reports. The evidence confirmed that Autumn had been shot at close range, and Byest was the only other person present at the time of the shooting. The case of Autumn Shanks provided clear forensic evidence, digital proof, and witness testimony that pointed to Dannquarious Byest as a shooter. His changing statements, the gunpowder residue on his hands, the threatening text messages, and the reports from witnesses all supported the conclusion that Autumn did not die by suicide. Instead, she was killed after a toxic and controlling relationship turned deadly. Even after his arrest, Byest denied that he killed Autumn. He told detectives that she was upset that night and that she may have taken her own life. However, forensic experts proved that the gunshot wound was not self-inflicted. The angle of the shot and the way the gun was found did not match a suicide case. Autopsy reports showed that the bullet entered Autumn's head from a position that suggested someone else shot her. If she had shot herself, the bullet would have gone in at a different angle. Detectives also looked at Byest's behavior before and after the shooting. Surveillance cameras near the apartment showed him pacing outside nervously after the gunshot. He did not call 911 immediately. Instead, he was seen on his phone, possibly deleting messages or trying to cover his tracks. Neighbors also reported that they had heard shouting before the gunshot. One neighbor said they had heard a woman's voice crying and begging before everything went silent. With all this physical, forensic, and witness evidence, the police were confident that Byest was responsible for Autumn's death. When news of Autumn's death and Byest's arrest spread, it caused a strong reaction from the public. Many people were shocked that such a tragic crime had happened in their community. Local news channels reported the case, and social media users started sharing posts about Autumn. People demanded justice and wanted to see Byest punished for his actions. Some people also used this case to talk about the dangers of abusive relationships. Autumn's friends and family organized a candlelight vigil in her memory. The event was held at Terry High School, where she had studied. People lit candles, released balloons, and shared memories of Autumn. Her friends spoke about how she was a kind person who did not deserve what happened to her. Many community members also called for stricter laws against domestic violence. They believed that more could be done to protect people who are in toxic relationships. Some even started fundraisers and awareness campaigns to help other women who might be in dangerous situations. As the case moved to court, the public closely followed the trial. People wanted to make sure that Byest would face justice for his actions. The police and prosecutors presented all the evidence they had gathered, including forensic reports that proved the shot was not self-inflicted, gunpowder residue on Byest's hands, showing that he had fired the gun, text messages and witness statements proving he had been threatening Autumn. With all this evidence, it became clear that Byest was responsible for Autumn's death. The community hoped that he would receive a fair trial and the right punishment for his crime. Prosecutors worked to prove that Byest was responsible for the death of 21-year-old Autumn Shanks. The defense team tried to argue that Autumn took her own life, but the evidence told a different story. The prosecution presented 3 key points. Byest had a history of abuse and control. Forensic evidence proved that he was a shooter. Text messages and witness statements showed his motive. Prosecutors showed the jury records of past arguments and fights between Byest and Autumn. Witnesses, including Autumn's friends and neighbors, testified that they had heard yelling and crying from her apartment in the past. A friend of Autumn shared a text message where Autumn said she wanted to leave Byest, but was afraid of what he might do. The forensic team confirmed that Autumn was shot in the head at close range. The angle of the bullet suggested someone else pulled the trigger. Gunpowder residue was found on Byest's hands, which proved that he fired the gun. The gun was not in Autumn's hand when officers arrived, which suggested that it was placed near her body afterward. Investigators found messages where Byest threatened Autumn. One message from Byest said, "If I can't have you, no one will." Another message showed that Autumn wanted to leave him. Prosecutors explained that Byest did not want Autumn to leave him, and that led to the crime. The defense team argued that Autumn's death was a suicide or an accident. They focused on 2 main points. They claimed Autumn might have taken her own life. They tried to cast doubt on the forensic findings. The defense argued that Autumn was stressed and could have harmed herself. They pointed out that the gun was found near her body. They tried to say that the relationship was not bad enough for Byest to hurt Autumn. The defense questioned the accuracy of the gunshot residue test. They said that Byest might have gotten gunpowder on his hands from touching the gun after the incident. They tried to argue that the blood spatter analysis could have been misinterpreted. However, the forensic experts stood by their findings. They explained the science behind their tests and proved that Autumn did not shoot herself. After hearing all the evidence, the jury had to make a decision. They reviewed the history of abuse in Byest and Autumn's relationship, the forensic proof that Byest was the shooter, the text messages showing Byest threats. The jury found Byest guilty of murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison. He would not be eligible for parole. With the trial over, the case was closed. The court's decision ensured that Byest will remain in prison for the rest of his life. Autumn's story became a warning for others. Many people learned that controlling behavior and threats can turn into something worse. People in similar relationships started speaking out and seeking help. Autumn Shanks' death was a tragic case. However, her story now helps others understand the dangers of abusive relationships. Her case serves as a lesson for anyone who feels trapped in a toxic situation to get help before it's too late. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.